Hey everyone, and welcome back for another deep dive. Today we're going to be talking about something really interesting, the intersection of social psychology and marketing.
Yeah, it's a fascinating area.
It really is. You'll be surprised to learn that just understanding some basic human biases can lead to some really impressive results in marketing.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
We've got a great real-world example lined up for you today where a simple tweet, and this tweet was based on a psychological principle, completely changed the outcome of a blood donation campaign.
It's amazing how those little quirks in our behavior can be, well, leveraged, I guess you could say.
Yeah, for sure. Leverage to create marketing magic.
Yeah.
Okay, so to kick things off, we're going to take a little trip back in time to 1964, back to the tragic story of Kitty Genovese.
Oh, wow.
Now, you're probably thinking, what does a murder case have to do with marketing?
Yeah, I can see why you'd ask that.
Right. But stick with me here. There's a connection. This case actually sparked some groundbreaking research into a psychological phenomenon known as the bystander effect.
The Kitty Genovese case was just awful. But what's really interesting is that there were a lot of witnesses. Like, a lot. And yet, nobody stepped in to help.
It's so hard to comprehend.
It really is. At the time, people were outraged. They couldn't believe the apathy. But psychologists Bibb Latané and John Darley, they started looking into it and uncovered something unexpected.
Okay, I'm listening.
So it turns out that the large number of witnesses might have actually been the problem. Like, the more people there were, the less likely anyone was to help.
That's counterintuitive.
I know, right?
Yeah.
You think more witnesses would equal more help.
For sure.
But their research showed that as the number of bystanders goes up, individual responsibility actually goes down.
Oh, I see.
Everyone just assumes someone else will take action.
So they all just think, oh, someone else will call the police or, someone else is helping.
Yeah, exactly. And as a result, nobody does anything.
Wow. So this bystander effect or this diffusion of responsibility, what does it have to do with marketing?
Well, think about it this way. Fast forward a few decades, and the NHS in the UK was running a blood donation campaign.
Okay.
And their nationwide appeals for blood just weren't as effective as they hoped they'd be.
You needed more donors.
Exactly. And Charlie Snow, he was leading the creative agency working with the NHS, and he saw a connection to the bystander effect.
Interesting. So are you saying that people weren't donating blood because they just assumed other people were taking care of it?
Yes, exactly like those witnesses who assumed someone else had called the police.
It's like a collective apathy almost.
Yeah, it's like a collective apathy towards helping out. So they decided to run an experiment.
Oh, okay. What did they do?
So instead of these broad national appeals, they tried something different. They localized the message.
Ah,
So instead of saying blood stocks are low nationally, they tested ads that were very specific. They said things like, blood stocks are low in Basildon, please help.
so they made it feel more personal, more urgent.
Exactly. They made the need seem more immediate, more local, and it worked.
It did.
Yeah. They saw a 10% improvement in the cost per donation just by making that little tweak to the message.
Wow, that's pretty impressive. So just by tapping into that bystander effect, they were able to make their campaign way more effective.
Yeah, this is a really great example of how behavioral science can be used in marketing. It's not just about creating catchy slogans or flashy visuals.
Right.
It's about understanding what actually drives decision-making, understanding the psychology behind it,
It's about being smarter, I guess.
right? It's about moving away from gut feelings and moving towards a more scientific, evidence-based approach.
I like that. So behavioral science is all about really testing and experimenting, just like any other field of science, right?
Exactly. It's about using rigorous methods, which is something you don't always see in traditional marketing, which often relies on, hunches and what's been done in the past.
So we've seen how understanding the bystander effect can make a real difference in a marketing campaign. Are there any other psychological principles that we can use in this way?
Absolutely. Let's move on to the placebo effect.
The placebo effect. Okay. Now, this might seem even further removed from marketing.
I can see why you'd think that.
Right. I mean, we all know about the placebo effect in medicine.
Mhm.
You give someone a sugar pill, you tell them it's some powerful drug, and surprisingly, they often get better.
It's pretty remarkable.
It is. But how does this relate to marketing?
Well, the placebo effect basically shows us how powerful expectations can be.
Okay.
The mere belief that something will work can actually make it work, even if there's no real active ingredient involved.
Right.
And this principle goes way beyond medicine. It has a huge impact on how consumers perceive products and services.
So you're saying that our expectations can actually shape our experiences, even when we're buying, like, a car or a new phone.
Absolutely.
Interesting.
And what's even more fascinating is that even tiny details can influence those expectations and change how consumers behave.
Oh, come on, really? Like, what kind of small details? Can you give me an example?
Well, there's research showing that even the color of a pill can impact the placebo effect. Like red painkillers, for example. They're often seen as more effective than blue ones.
Wait, so you're telling me that if I want my pain meds to work better, I should be looking for the red pills?
Well, it's not quite that simple, but the color does play a role.
That's wild. But how does that translate to, say, selling a car or a smartphone? I mean, those aren't pills.
It's the same principle. Think about it. We associate the color red with strength, power, those kinds of things, whereas blue is more about calmness and tranquility.
Okay, yeah, I see that.
So by understanding these little cues, these associations, marketers can tap into that psychology,
Huh?
you know, shape perceptions in really powerful ways.
So you're saying that things like packaging design, the colors they use, even the language in the ads, all those details, they can actually have a big impact.
Exactly. They influence what the consumer expects, and ultimately that influences their decision to buy or not.
So all those traditional marketing research methods, like the surveys and focus groups, they might be missing something important.
They might be, because you're just asking people what they want, right? But people don't always know what they want, or at least they're not always aware of all the things that are influencing them.
So those surveys where people say, oh, I'll definitely buy that new gadget, or I'm totally going to start eating healthy, they're not always accurate.
Exactly. There's often a big gap between what people say they'll do and what they actually end up doing.
And that's a big challenge for marketers, right?
It is. And this is where behavioral science can really help.
How so?
Well, instead of just relying on what people tell you, you actually look at their behavior. You do experiments. You dig a little deeper into their motivations. It gives you a much more accurate picture.
So it's like that old saying, actions speak louder than words. But in this case, it's more like observed behavior speaks louder than self-reported intentions.
Exactly. Think about the bystander effect and the placebo effect. Perfect examples of how our actions don't always match up with what we say we'll do.
So instead of just asking, what will you do? We need to focus on what are you actually doing?
Right. It's a more indirect approach, for sure, but ultimately it's more insightful. It gives you a better understanding of that often irrational, unpredictable human behavior.
So we're basically trying to peel back the layers of the onion here, trying to figure out all those hidden mechanisms that drive our choices.
Exactly. And it's pretty humbling when you start to realize how much we don't know about ourselves.
Yeah, it definitely makes you think.
It does. So we've covered a lot today. Tragic murders, blood drives, the power of expectations, that gap between what we say and what we do.
It's been quite a journey, but what's the main takeaway for our listeners? What's the one thing they should remember from all of this?
I think the most important thing to remember is that human behavior is just way more complex than we often give it credit for. There's a lot going on beneath the surface.
And by understanding that complexity, we can make better decisions, right? Not just in marketing, but in life in general.
Absolutely. It's about using this knowledge wisely, approaching it with a sense of curiosity, a sense of wonder. There's always more to learn.
So if businesses ignore these insights from behavioral science, they're missing out on a huge opportunity.
I'd say so, yeah. By understanding and using these principles, they can get a real edge over their competitors. I mean, think about it. If something as simple as the color of a pill can have an effect, just imagine the possibilities when you really start digging into the complexities of human behavior.
That's a good point. So this has been really eye-opening, but how can our listeners who might not be marketing experts actually apply these ideas in their own lives? Like, what's in it for them?
Well, the applications of behavioral science go way beyond just marketing. Think about your personal goals, how you make decisions, even understanding your own biases.
Okay, give me an example. How could understanding the placebo effect, for instance, help me out in my daily life?
Let's say you're trying to start working out more often, get into a good routine.
Yeah.
Well, knowing about the power of expectations, you could create a whole ritual around your workout,
Yeah.
like use positive self-talk and even visualize yourself, succeeding.
Oh, okay.
And by setting up those positive expectations, you might actually find it's easier to stick with it.
So it's like you're giving yourself that little mental push.
Right. A little nudge in the right direction.
Yeah, using the power of your own mind to actually influence your actions.
Exactly. And this can apply to all sorts of things,
Mm-hmm.
Like think about asking for a raise or even asking someone out on a date
Hmm.
or trying to get your friend to see your point of view.
Right.
Understanding behavioral science, it can give you a real leg up in those situations.
Yeah, it's like having a secret weapon for dealing with all those, tricky social situations.
Yeah.
But this makes me wonder, I mean, isn't there a risk that we could end up like manipulating people if we start using all these, psychological tricks? It just feels kind of ethically iffy.
That's a really good point. It's
Yeah.
definitely important to use this stuff responsibly. The goal isn't to manipulate or deceive.
Right.
It's about understanding how people behave
Yeah.
and using that knowledge in a way that's ethical and honest.
So it's about using it for good, basically,
Exactly.
not for tricking people into doing things that aren't in their best interest.
Right. You always have to keep ethics in mind.
Yeah. Okay, good to know. So we've talked about the bystander effect, the placebo effect, and the importance of expectations. What other insights from behavioral science can help us, kind of reach our full potential?
Well, one of the most interesting areas of research looks at the difference between what people say they'll do and what they actually do.
Oh, interesting.
Traditional marketing, it relies a lot on things like surveys and focus groups, where you're basically asking people to tell you what they want and what they're planning to do.
Right, like companies spend millions trying to figure out what consumers want.
Exactly. But the problem is our conscious minds aren't always that great at predicting our own behavior.
Okay.
We're influenced by all these subconscious things, biases, emotions, things we might not even realize are affecting us.
So those surveys where people say they're definitely going to buy that new product or make some big change in their lives, they might not be totally reliable.
Exactly. There's often a gap between intention and action. And that's a real challenge for marketers.
I can imagine.
Yeah. And that's where behavioral science can really come in handy.
How so?
Well, instead of just relying on what people tell you,
Yeah.
you can actually look at how they behave. You can run experiments and really get into what's motivating them. It gives you a much clearer picture.
So it's more about observing what people actually do rather than just asking them what they'll do.
Exactly. It's subtle, but much more effective.
It's like we've been given this decoder ring for the human mind.
It kind of is.
But it also makes you realize how much we still don't know about ourselves.
It definitely does.
Yeah.
And that's what makes this field so fascinating. There's always something new to discover, some new layer of complexity to unravel.
Absolutely. Well, we've definitely covered a lot of ground today, from that tragic murder case to blood drives, from the power of expectations to, that disconnect between what we intend to do and what we actually do.
Look what you have.
What's the one thing you want our listeners to walk away with today?
If I had to pick one key takeaway, it's that human behavior is way more nuanced and multifaceted than we often realize. And by understanding that complexity, by acknowledging our own biases and those hidden forces that shape our choices, we can really unlock our full potential.
That's a powerful message.
And not just in marketing, in
Right.
every area of our lives.
Absolutely. It's about embracing that knowledge and being open to learning more, asking questions. And the more we understand about ourselves and how our minds work, the better equipped we are to make good decisions and just, navigate the world around us.
That's the key.
Yeah, I love that. So this deep dive has just been a starting point, really.
Scratching the surface.
There's so much more out there to discover.
Absolutely.
So keep that curiosity alive, keep asking questions, and who knows what amazing things you'll find.
I'll leave you with one final thought, something to think about. If something as small as the color of a pill can influence our perceptions and even our physical experiences, what other subtle things out there might be shaping our decisions without us even knowing it?
That's a great question to ponder. And on that note, we'll wrap up this deep dive. Thanks for joining us, everyone. Until next time, keep exploring, keep learning. And remember, knowledge is power.